Her phone buzzed at 3:07 a.m., the vibration tearing her from shallow sleep. Emily blinked at the glowing screen, her breath catching when she saw the message. "We need to talk." Her heart raced faster than her thoughts. Jacob had been distant for weeks, and she had begged herself to believe it was only the miles, only the hours that kept them apart. She whispered, "Please, don't let it be what I think," but the silence of her empty room pressed back harder than any answer. The text glared like a wound, demanding attention, offering nothing. She typed a trembling reply, then deleted it, afraid of what might follow. Her pulse throbbed in her ears as she stared at the screen, waiting for a typing bubble that never came. Emily stared at the dark ceiling, the echo of the message louder than her heartbeat. Jacob had promised her they'd close the distance soon, that every sleepless night would be worth it. She remembered his voice saying, "Trust me, we're stronger than this." Yet his silence tonight weighed heavier than any promise. Her phone remained lifeless, no replies, no excuses. She whispered to herself, "Why does love always feel like waiting for someone who never arrives?" Outside, the city was asleep, but inside her chest, chaos throbbed like an alarm she couldn't shut off. She scrolled back through their old messages, rereading the late-night promises. Jacob had written, "One day soon, no more airports, no more screens." Her chest tightened as she clutched the phone like it carried oxygen. Every emoji, every half-hearted reassurance now felt like paper walls, barely holding back a flood. She whispered, "I gave everything just to keep believing." The screen blurred with tears she refused to wipe away, afraid that removing them would erase him too. Her mind replayed the last video call, Jacob smiling faintly as he said, "Just a little longer." But she noticed then how his eyes darted, how he ended the call too quickly. She had buried her doubts under hope, but tonight they clawed back. The message felt like a blade slicing through every excuse she had ever made for him. She whispered, "If he was leaving, why didn't he just say it?" Her chest ached with a loneliness too loud for silence to hide. The night stretched endlessly, each minute heavier than the last. Emily's eyes stayed fixed on her phone, praying for a reply that never came. She remembered her confidant Sarah's warning, "If someone wants to stay, you'll never have to beg them." Her throat tightened at the truth she had refused to face. The silence was not distance, it was decision. She curled against the pillow, clutching it like a stand-in for Jacob, whispering, "Don't make me let go." But the only response was the soft hum of the city outside, reminding her that she was utterly alone. Emily sat at her small kitchen table, coffee gone cold beside her laptop. She scrolled through airline sites again, heart pounding at numbers she could never afford. Jacob once said, "Money's just paper, love is priceless." She clung to those words even as bills piled up. Her hands trembled when she imagined stepping off a plane into his arms. She whispered, "I'd cross oceans if it meant just one night without missing you." Outside, morning light broke across the blinds, but inside she felt stuck in the same endless night. She kept his hoodie draped over the back of her chair, the fabric worn soft from sleepless nights. Emily pressed it to her face, inhaling faint cologne that was fading but still clung stubbornly. Jacob had once laughed, "It'll be like I'm there with you." But every day, the scent weakened, and the silence deepened. She whispered into the folds, "I'm still here, aren't I? Still waiting?" The hoodie carried her devotion like an artifact of love, fragile and fraying, but irreplaceable. On her desk, postcards from Jacob lined the wall, faded snapshots of cities she had never seen. Each one carried words like, "soon," and "wish you were here." Emily traced her finger over the handwriting, memorizing the curves like a prayer. She whispered, "Every card is a promise waiting to expire." Her friends asked why she still waited, why she gave so much. She never had an answer that made sense, only a heart that refused to stop hoping. The phone lit up once with Jacob's name weeks ago, and Emily remembered answering in a breathless rush. His voice had been tired, distracted, yet she clung to every syllable as if it were gospel. He said, "I'll make it right, just give me time." She told herself that was enough. Tonight, staring at her silent screen, she whispered, I gave you years already. The room echoed with nothing but her own words, sharp reminders of devotion left unanswered. Emily stood by the window, city lights flickering below like distant stars. She imagined Jacob looking at another skyline, breathing under the same sky, but never close enough to touch. She pressed her palm against the glass, whispering, "Do you ever feel this distance the way I do?" Her reflection stared back at her, eyes heavy with both faith and exhaustion. She had built her life around waiting, sacrificing nights, plans, and dreams. The question wasn't whether she loved him, it was how much she was willing to lose for him. Emily stared at her phone, the dark screen mocking her patience. The clock glowed past midnight, yet her chest still pulsed with the promise Jacob had made. "I'll call tonight. I swear," she whispered into the silence. "I've been waiting my whole life." The hours dragged, her apartment wrapped in shadows, walls pressing closer with every tick of the clock. She replayed his excuses, meetings, deadlines, exhaustion, each word carving deeper into her resolve. The last time they spoke, his voice had snapped sharp. "You don't get how busy I am." She thought, "I do. I get that I'll never be busy enough for you to notice me." Loneliness filled every corner of her small living room. And still, she clutched her phone like a lifeline, knowing it would never ring. Morning brought no relief. Sarah leaned across the cafe table, voice low but steady, eyes cutting through the chatter. "Emily, this isn't love. It's waiting for someone who's already gone." Emily's fingers tightened around her mug until her knuckles whitened. Steam rose like a fragile veil between them, curling and fading. She said, "You don't know him like I do," but her voice trembled, betraying doubt she couldn't hide. Sarah's expression softened only slightly, her truth burning brighter than sympathy. "Love doesn't ask you to disappear while he lives his life." The words pierced harder than the bitter coffee, settling in Emily's chest like stones. She stared into the dark liquid, her reflection wavering, as though even her own face no longer believed her excuses. That night, Emily scrolled through Jacob's social media with trembling fingers, pulse hammering. There he was in a crowded bar, laughter frozen mid-frame, his arms slung casually around a coworker she didn't know. Her stomach twisted violently. She whispered, "You said you were working late." The glow of the screen seared her eyes, each detail screaming louder than any confession. The comments below, "Great night, best company," cut deeper than the image itself. She slammed the laptop shut, the sound sharp against the stillness of her apartment. Her chest ached, breath shallow, every inhale like glass tearing her apart. Trust wasn't broken in a single blow, she realized. It was eroded piece by piece, until she had nothing left to cling to but scraps. Emily's voice cracked as she confronted him over the phone, fingers gripping the device like it might shatter. "You said you were at work," she whispered, her throat raw. Jacob's sigh rolled heavy through the line, laced with irritation. "It was nothing, Emily, you always overthink." His tone wasn't defensive, it was dismissive, the kind of calm that stabbed deeper than anger. Her tears blurred the room, heart pounding louder than his distant voice. "I'm drowning here, and you don't even notice," she said, words breaking apart under weight. Silence pressed against her ear, his breath steady, hers jagged. She realized then that his indifference wasn't new. It had been waiting for her all along, buried in every excuse, every sigh, every delay. Later that night, Emily stepped onto the fire escape, bare feet gripping the cold metal. The city buzzed below her, cars hissing across wet pavement, neon lights flickering like false stars. The air bit at her skin, but the fire in her chest burned hotter. She whispered, "I gave up everything for you," voice stolen quickly by the wind. Each light below belonged to someone moving forward, while she stood suspended, tethered to a love that no longer reached back. Her breath fogged the air, dissolving faster than her hope. Somewhere across miles, Jacob slept easily, free of the chains she willingly carried. She wrapped her arms tight around herself, realizing the promises she kept alive were heavy enough to crush her. Emily kicked off her shoes by the door, exhaustion clinging to her bones after a long shift. On the hallway table sat an envelope, the kind that made her stomach twist before she even touched it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Jacob's looping scrawl, something she used to trace with her fingers over postcards. She tore it open, pulse pounding, and scanned the first line. "I can't do this anymore." Her knees nearly buckled, the words blurring as her hands shook. She pressed the page to her chest, whispering, "After all these years, I get paper instead of your voice." The apartment spun around her, every corner echoing with the silence he had left. She read it again and again, desperate for softness in his tone, but the lines dripped only with finality. Emily dropped the letter on the counter, fingers trembling as though it burned. She reached for her phone, desperate for proof that the letter was some cruel mistake. Scrolling through Jacob's profile, her breath hitched. A new photo stared back. Jacob with his arm draped around another woman, their fingers entwined like threads Emily thought belonged to her. The caption read, "New beginnings," followed by a heart. Her chest tightened until it felt like ribs might splinter. "So this was it," she whispered into the hollow kitchen. "I was just the waiting room until you found her." The silence that followed was louder than a scream. Betrayal wasn't just abandonment. It was replacement. Her thumb hovered before finally hitting call on Sarah's name. The moment the line clicked, her voice cracked open, sobs spilling into the silence. "He replaced me," Emily gasped, and he didn't even say it out loud. Sarah's voice steadied her like a hand through the phone, gentle but unflinching. "You gave him everything, but he never gave it back." Emily pressed her forehead against the cold glass of her window, tears streaking unchecked. "I thought waiting was proof of love," she whispered, voice muffled against the glass. "But it was just proof of my loneliness." The truth slashed deeper than any argument. For the first time she saw her sacrifice not as love, but as silence turned into chains. The shoebox under her bed waited like a coffin, filled with pieces of a life she thought they were building together. Emily pulled it out and sat on the floor, hands trembling as she lifted its contents one by one. Airline ticket stubs from flights she couldn't take, faded notes with his messy handwriting, postcards with promises scrawled on the back. The navy hoodie she had worn on nights she needed his scent still carried a faint trace of cologne, stubborn and fading. Tears splashed onto the fabric as she clutched it to her chest. "These were the pieces I built my life on," she whispered. "And he built his on lies." The relics were heavy in her lap, anchors from a ship that had long sailed without her. When dawn crept through the blinds, Emily stood at her window, the city below painted in pale pink and gold. Cars hummed awake, strangers moving forward while she remained frozen in place. The letter lay crumpled on the counter behind her, but its words were tattooed in her mind. She whispered to her reflection, "I thought we were closing the gap, but you were only closing me out." The glass mirrored her pale face, eyes swollen from a night of tears, but within the wreckage, something stirred. Anger sparked faintly beneath the devastation, a flicker fighting to stay alive. For the first time, she wasn't just mourning Jacob's betrayal. She was mourning the years she had given away. Emily dialed Jacob's number, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. Dawn seeped through the blinds, painting her living room in pale gold, exposing every corner she had once filled with his promises. After endless rings, his voice answered, groggy and annoyed. "It's early, Emily." Her throat burned as words tore out of her. "Early? I've been awake all night, Jacob, waiting for a call you never made while you post new beginnings with someone else." Silence buzzed through the line, louder than his breathing. She pressed the phone tighter to her ear, tears blurring her sight. He muttered, "You don't understand." Her voice cracked like glass. "No, I understand. I was never your choice, just your convenience. You love the idea of me waiting, not the reality of loving me back." Jacob's tone sharpened, dismissive and cold. "You're being dramatic. I didn't owe you forever." The words slammed into her chest harder than the betrayal itself. Her voice trembled, but rose in defiance. "Dramatic? I gave you everything. My nights, my years, my dreams, all for a future you dangled in front of me like a prize. She swallowed back sobs, nails digging into her palm. He exhaled, weary and detached. I never asked for your sacrifices. Her body stiffened, the phone shaking in her grip. You didn't ask because you knew I would give them anyway, she whispered, her tone breaking into rage. And you let me drown while you swam to shore, smiling at someone else. Every syllable was a blade, cutting both ways. Her anger surged, words spilling like floodwaters she could no longer hold back. Every missed call, every excuse, every empty promise, I turned them into hope because I was too afraid to admit the truth. I built my life on lies. You never bothered to correct. Her voice rose higher, trembling, shattering the quiet apartment around her. You told me oceans meant nothing, that one day we'd close the gap, but the only thing you ever closed was every door behind me while I was still running toward you. Her sob broke through the rant, raw and uncontainable, echoing into silence. On the other end, Jacob's exhale hissed through the speaker, detached and almost bored, as if she were no longer worth the weight of his words. Finally, Jacob spoke, his voice flat and merciless. Emily, I've moved on. You should too. The line sliced through her, sharper than any blade. The phone slipped from her grasp, hitting the couch with a thud that felt like a death knell. Her chest convulsed, sobs ripping free, louder than she had ever allowed herself to cry. She screamed into the hollow room. I was enough. You just never saw me. Her voice cracked into silence, echoing back from bare walls like a cruel reminder. Outside, the city awoke, neon fading into daylight, people moving forward with their lives, while inside she crumbled alone. Her body folded in on itself, arms clutching her knees, as if she could hold her heart together by force. Hours bled away, daylight spilling across the room while Emily remained on the floor, back pressed to the couch, the weight of the call crushing her shoulders. Her eyes were swollen, her voice broken, yet the silence around her was louder than ever. She whispered into the emptiness. I begged for scraps and called it love. I thought devotion was strength, but it was only chains I put on myself. The phone lay discarded beside her, its screen dark, as though even technology refused to carry Jacob's voice anymore. For the first time, she let the silence answer back. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't closure, but it was real. Her heart had been shattered, but in the quiet she realized, survival starts in the wreckage. Emily woke stiff and aching, her body curled awkwardly on the living room floor, where exhaustion had finally claimed her. The phone still lay beside her, its dark screen reflecting nothing but her hollow eyes. She dragged herself to the kitchen, the apartment echoing with a silence that seemed louder than Jacob's voice had ever been. On the counter, the crumpled letter waited like a wound that refused to close. She smoothed it open with trembling fingers, but the words blurred through her tears. This is what's left of us, she whispered hoarsely, paper and silence. The kettle whistled, sharp and shrill, but the sound felt alien in the stillness. She poured boiling water into a chipped mug, hands steadying only as steam curled upward, fragile but rising, unlike her broken heart. By mid-morning, a gentle knock broke the monotony. Sarah stepped inside, eyes widening at the sight of Emily's swollen face and slouched posture. She sat down beside her on the couch without a word, her presence steady as stone. Finally, Sarah whispered, "You don't have to carry him anymore." Emily's voice cracked like brittle glass. "I don't even know who I am without the waiting." Sarah gripped her hand, grounding her. "Then maybe it's time to find out." Emily exhaled shakily, something between a sob and a laugh. For the first time in years, she felt the smallest crack of light through the wall of grief. It wasn't relief, not yet, but it was the faintest reminder that life outside of Jacob's shadow still existed, waiting patiently for her to claim it. Afternoon sunlight painted the apartment in gold as Emily sat at her desk, staring at the shoebox of keepsakes like it held the answers to every mistake. She opened it slowly, pulling out faded postcards with his handwriting looping across the back, promises scrawled like lifelines she had clung to for years. Her chest constricted, but instead of tucking them back, she struck a lighter. She whispered, "You don't get to live on my walls anymore." One by one the postcards curled in flame, smoke rising like ghosts finally leaving her apartment. The smell of burning paper filled the room, acrid but cleansing. Ashes fell into a ceramic bowl, dark and weightless, and with each one she felt a fraction lighter. For once, she wasn't keeping what hurt her, she was letting it burn. Evening fell, and Emily stepped onto the fire escape, her bare feet cold against rusted metal. The city stretched out before her, alive with motion, neon signs flickering, cars rushing, voices drifting upward like a language she had forgotten. She leaned against the railing, hair whipping in the cool breeze, the distance she had once hated now humming like possibility. She whispered into the night, "You're free now, Jacob, and so am I." The words didn't erase the ache, but they cut loose part of the weight. She closed her eyes, letting the hum of traffic fill her ears, realizing the gap that once caged her could also be space. Space to breathe, to break, to rebuild. For the first time, the distance wasn't punishment. It was hers. Night returned, quieter this time, and Emily slipped into bed. The empty pillow beside her was still there, but she didn't clutch it like a substitute. She lay on her back, eyes tracing cracks in the ceiling she had never noticed before, her chest rising in slow, deliberate breaths. The silence remained, sharp but no longer unbearable. She whispered into the darkness, "You're gone, but I'm still here." The words were not victory, not forgiveness, but survival, and survival was enough for tonight. Tears came softer now, less frantic, less consuming, like rain instead of a storm. She knew grief would linger, but beneath its shadow something else stirred, not hope for him, but the fragile beginning of hope for herself. Emily sat at her desk, staring at the ashes in the bowl. The last pieces of Jacob's promises had crumbled into dust, black flecks clinging to her fingertips. She pressed them together, watching the ashes smear across her skin like stains she couldn't wash away. Her chest ached, but there was also relief, proof that what once consumed her was now small enough to fit in her hands. She whispered, "You're gone, but you don't get to live here anymore." The words were shaky but final. Outside, a car horn blared and laughter echoed from the street below, reminders that the world had never stopped spinning even when hers collapsed. She walked through her apartment slowly, each corner carrying a memory she once clung to. The couch where she had waited for his calls, the window where she had pressed her forehead while whispering into the night. Every space hummed with ghosts, but the silence felt different now. She wasn't waiting anymore, she was saying goodbye. "This is my space again," she whispered, her voice echoing faintly against bare walls. It didn't feel like victory, but it wasn't defeat either. For the first time, she let the quiet settle without fighting it, as though the walls themselves were finally exhaling with her. That evening, Emily stepped outside into the cool night, pulling Sarah's borrowed jacket tight around her shoulders. The air smelled of rain, the pavement glistening under street lamps. She paused on the sidewalk, watching strangers hurry past, lives intersecting without noticing her. For years she had stood still while Jacob moved forward, but now the current of the world tugged at her too. She whispered, "I don't have to stand here forever." Her voice was swallowed by the hum of traffic, but the words were real enough to feel like the first step. For the first time, the distance ahead of her wasn't about him. It was about her. Back inside, Emily scrolled through her messages one last time, eyes landing on the thread that had once carried every promise. The words looked foreign now, stripped of their meaning, hollow echoes of nights she had begged for his attention. With trembling hands, she hovered over the delete button. Her chest tightened, breath catching, but then she exhaled slowly and pressed it. The thread vanished, replaced by empty space. She whispered, "No more waiting." Her phone screen reflected her face back at her, tear-streaked but steadier, as though she had finally chosen herself over him. Later, Emily sat by the window, the city glittering beyond the glass like 1,000 distant stars. Her reflection stared back, pale and tired, but no longer hollow. She whispered, almost to herself, "And that was the last time his name ever lit up my phone." The words hung heavy, final, but also freeing. For years, she had defined her life by waiting for him to return. Now the silence was her answer, painful, merciless, and unchangeable. She leaned her forehead against the cool glass, letting the truth settle deep inside her. Jacob was gone, but she was still here. And surviving finally was enough.